Tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, I am back and Aaron has to listen to me talk about the salary cap. But before that, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia Worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, and I am joined by my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, did you miss me?
Of course. Although it was nice to talk to Joe. I haven't talked to Joe in a while. It was nice to have him
I'm
on.
sad how nice of a job he did.
Yeah, Joe did a great job. Ran through some stuff. But yeah, no, it would have been nice to have you. I called for you a couple times in the chat, trying to get some of the more intricate parts of the salary cap other than just the base numbers. And honestly, at the time of last show, we still only had the original tweet stuff, where that still enrages people when they see the full number and they're like, oh, that's a huge overpay. And tough to combat some of that in the chat when we don't know the numbers, but now we've got a better grasp of what everybody looks like. And then additionally, some of the moves that Brandon Beane made, but it's good to have you back. I'm glad that you traveled safely and made it back safe, especially in 2025, traveling on planes. I always worry for you, Greg. I see all these things going on with planes. I want to make sure you're all right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've traveled an obscene amount. I think we were looking. I've spent over 40 nights in a hotel room so far already this year. I've flown dozens of times already. So I've been very fortunate. I have not had any of the craziness that you've seen on the videos or anything like that. I've had pretty normal. I've had a couple delays, wacky things like that. Nothing crazy, nothing major cancellations. There's certainly none of the videos online of stuff lighting on fire, flipping upside down.
So you haven't had to run off the wing of a plane?
I have not had to Tom Cruise myself off of a plane or anything like that. But you never know. Those things may come.
Knock on that mahogany.
Yeah. I don't need that in my life. But I will say there is some benefit of the timing here because, like you said, a lot of the stuff that's happened over the last little bit here, we didn't really know the details when the headline comes out. And over the last couple days here, we've kind of caught our breath on a lot of this stuff. I have the details on almost every deal. There's only one major one that I don't actually have the numbers on. I pretty much know the ones that I don't have the numbers on. I still know the gist of what it is going when it's 1 year, 2 million reported. Like, how different can it actually be when the actual guts of the details come out? But everything else, I have the real numbers. I know where it stands. I have some of the recent things like the Matt Milano news. We'll talk about all the other pieces. So for a lot of folks that, obviously Aaron and I did our offensive and defensive wish list shows kind of early, got those prepped, and then I wasn't here last week. So I'm going to go through like a recap of a lot of things that I didn't have a chance to kind of give any takes on or give an update, but it's going to go through some of the buckets of either releases, trades, or cap or restructures, pay cuts that created some cap space. Then our group of extensions that everybody knows about. Then we'll go through some position groups of the players we added and what we now know about the deals now that they've come up, where those things are coming through and how they've really kind of helped us. Anything else before we dive into it, Aaron?
No, other than I hope that people in Western New York got a chance to get outside today. I don't know how it was in Cleveland, but we got a random 70-degree March day, and I don't see another one on the horizon. So I hope you got outside before we get into the numbers here.
We did. My son got to go out and swing and play on the playground and everything. He loved it. Although I wasn't aware of the gross reality coming back. My wife just told me at dinner time. She was looking at the weather. I was like, oh, really? It's
going
back in the 40s, lows in the 29. I saw a 2. Numbers shouldn't start with 2s anymore. That's dumb.
We abandoned homework tonight. I wrote the kids' teachers and was like, I don't even care that they didn't do it tonight. They need to be covered in dirt and mud and come in when the sun goes down tonight because we're not getting this for a bit.
That's good parenting. Parenting. Okay. So some of the quick ones that we knew happened a little bit ago, we had the release of Sam Martin and Von Miller. That was $2.1 million for Sam Martin, $8.4 million for Von Miller, 10.5 together. Those were actually the only real releases that we've had so far. I was a little bit surprised there. I think there's a couple other guys hanging in the balance, depending on what happens with the draft. We'll talk about some of those. But, good in the sense of what it creates long-term in the future. Obviously the one that happened, I think between the last show, had the Kaiir Elam trade happened the last time you and Joe were on? I think that was right after, maybe the next day.
I think it happened after, yeah.
So obviously Kaiir Elam was traded to the Cowboys. It was Kaiir Elam in a 6th for a 5th and a future 7th. I had actually predicted exactly Kaiir Elam in a 6th for a 5th, but they got even a little bit better than that with a future 7th, one more. But my entire logic was any slight round upgrade. I even would have done our 6th for an earlier 6th, because we get off of 2.5 million in cap space for Elam, and we get the roster spot back, because I just want to see somebody new in that spot. We know this is not the right fit. I'm not writing him off forever. I don't think we're going to see some star-studded renaissance, but I could see him being we'll talk about Dane Jackson in a minute, but that Levi Wallace, Dane Jackson, late career Josh Norman, adequate level starter player. I could totally see that, in the same way that to a lesser degree, people always saw Robert Gallery as a famous bust. And I always argue, I'm like, dude, he started as a guard in the NFL for 10 years. No 10-year starter is a bust. That's not how that works. Granted, he was supposed to be the greatest offensive tackle ever. Tony Baselli was a bust. He never played. That's a bust. Jamarcus Russell was a bust. But I could see Kaiir Elam having some starting caliber play in the future that makes it that he's probably never going to live up to the 1st round pick, but I don't know that his whole story is written yet.
Yeah, and we did touch over it happened before the show. I've been pretty consistent on Kaiir Elam. I think he's a classic example. One, I think it's one of the rare times, and we talked about it last week. Brandon Beane's not infallible. He's made mistakes. Yeah. Every GM makes mistakes, but this one seemed like a rare time where and this was something Brandon Beane was asked recently on the Fitz and Wit podcast, which I hope everybody got a chance
to listen to on the ride back today, the flight back.
He's always great in interviews and always candid. And I think this was one of they talked to him hey, do you build your team and draft to beat Kansas City? And he was kind of he kind of did his generic dance around that answer of, well, we got to win the division. I do think this was one of the times where that 13 seconds was lingering in their mouth, and what they thought they needed to get over that hump, they kind of reached for it and got something that wasn't a fit. Bill Parcells used to say, having the right grocery list to give to the chef to make the ingredients, you need to have that. I think this is one of the few times where it was really not a fit, and the coaches just didn't even want to get him on the field when you're talking about a John Butler as the DB's coach. And then by the time Butler was out of here, it was almost a little too late. He just was never really to get his legs on him, and it seemed to get worse. Obviously, when we saw him the last time was just I think everybody had enough, but I don't know that that's indicative of the player that he can be in the right system. To your point, I don't think he was ever a 1st round talent. The Bills took him late. I think he was still probably a mid to late 2nd round talent that they kind of reached for to fill that need. But I do think that in the right system, he could be a fine quarterback 2, a cornerback 3. He's a good player to have on your roster if you are going to be playing a lot of man coverage and you need a long, lanky, athletic corner like that. And so I hope Dallas is the fit for him to resurrect his career. I never want players to fail. Even if they didn't do well for us, I never want somebody to fail beyond that. So I hope he picks it up and gets his career going, because I think he's a fine player. Just was not the right fit here. And the Bills never leaned into what I think fans wanted to see, which was become a really heavy man defense with press corners, which would have probably fit him better.
Yeah, 100%. So a couple of the other moves that we knew about beforehand, we obviously saw the one restructure, which was Ed Oliver. I'll talk about that later in the show. I do think we're on the verge of probably needing one more, and I'll recommend who I think it's going to be. One of the other cap-saving moves was one that just happened here in the last day or so, and it was the renegotiation of Matt Milano. He redid his contract. He took a $3.66 million cap hit. I'm not gonna say in exchange. I'm just gonna say, and they voided out his contract next year. So a couple
Yeah, I don't
people
think he
wrote.
would want that necessarily.
I can't. So the way that I'm gonna guess this went down is, of course, Matt Milano's preference would have been to leave that and to get that money. I guess second to that would be not to pretend that he's going to get that money and to just be a full-on free agent, or to have a void year date that not forces but encourages the team to either want to agree to an extension that's more than just that year, or to let him go get another contract. And then third would be pretend like that money is still there, let the team kind of decide with no guarantees left and also no real benefit of when you do it, like a certain defensive tackle on our team right now, where they're kind of stuck in the balance of like, yeah, you're still on the team right now, but we might come to you for a pay cut, or we might draft a one tech in the draft and then we might not need you anymore. And those kind of things could come up where he could have been kind of flapping in the wind and just caught in between. So I'm gonna guess that it was his call to want that, but it could have also been the team just being honest and that like, hey, we're gonna release you next year if this comes up. So why don't we just set this up now, where if you play over your head, you're forcing our hand to need to agree to an extension, or if we are what we think it is, you get to go free next year. And they also had enough leverage that they got him to need to give back $3.66 million, which is not an immaterial amount. That's like more than a third of what he was going to get paid in cash. He was going to get like $9.9 million, and now he's going to get like $6.3 million. So that's like $6.3 million in cash. Again, he's still going to count against the cap, but the Bills in game checks and money are going to pay him like $6 million in change this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's less than I would have expected. Matt Milano for $6.3 million is a pretty good deal, but I'm also unfortunately going to read this as this is probably Matt Milano's last year in a Bills uniform.
It for sure is. I think this has a lot to do with Dorian Williams also, and the idea that
it's impossible not to see this as a relative positive or an endorsement.
It at least gave the Bills the leverage in this to feel like they can make a deal like this, where they don't have to go draft the replacement. They probably feel like they already have that in-house as he continues to develop. Like, he's taken steps every year. If you can give him another year of development here, with Milano still in the building, you were going to feel pretty good that he can step into that role. Even if it's a drop off to some extent, he can step into that role going forward, and you can move on from Matt Milano. I'm guessing the incentives.
I'd expect another competitor for that to be drafted here in April.
Sure. I mean, they've surprised us with taking Bernard and Dorian Williams back to back like they did in those years.
And with so many 4th and 5th round picks, like you can have like at linebacker, you can get really nice players in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Like,
we'll talk about that soon. I hope we don't have a lot of those. I know people love Brandon Beane drafting in the 5th. I want to get rid of as many of those as I can and get up. But that's a discussion for a different show.
Future shows.
But I do think that gave them some leverage to feel good about negotiating this. And I'm guessing that the Milano incentives are going to have to do with whether or not he can stay healthy and stay on the field and play certain amount of games.
It's got to be snap percentage games played. Yeah, snaps percentage games played. I'll be shocked if it's not something other than that. We have a decent amount of the detail yet, but I'll ask my Players Association contact if I can get the actual like language of what's there, what his exact incentives are. Sometimes I can get those. So I'll be able to find that out. And Chris here asking, do you think they threatened to release him now? It doesn't have to be an overt threat, but when a team comes to you with a pay cut proposal, the unspoken piece of the or else part is that we don't think you would agree to this unless we thought this was better than the alternative. And the player's going to go, well, what alternative? The alternative would be me staying and getting that money big. Oh no, the other one. So it doesn't mean that they had to directly, overtly threaten that, hey, if you don't take this pay cut, we're going to release you. But it's also a completely unspoken expectation that they wouldn't approach you with this if there wasn't the possibility. And it doesn't mean now. It could be that like, hey, I mean, Matt, if Dorian looks really good in camp and it's kind of 50-50 for the starting spot, which whether that's true or not, they could posture and say that. They could, position themselves as though that's possible. Hey, Matt, if we get to cut down day and Dorian looks 50-50 with you as the starter, maybe we'd have to do that post June 1st release and get some of that cap savings and just let it happen now. Do you want to find out then, or do you want to lock in some money right now? Because they did guarantee, they basically now he is a lock for this roster. They can't release him.
Right.
But he guaranteed that cash that he was going to get. Although that was the part that surprised me was that his agent let me take that. I was going to say his agent didn't think he could get more than 6.3 million on the market. It's probably a combination of his agent didn't think he could get much more than that, and Matt didn't want to do that. Is probably the most.
He probably wants to see out what he's done here, and maybe he could get that from Jacksonville.
Maybe he could get 7.5 million from Carolina.
Correct.
But do you really want to do that?
Yeah, I think he's at a point in his career where he's put a lot into this organization. I think there's a lot of respect between he and Sean McDermott. And so some of that stuff plays into this as well. But the good news is that Sean Dolak is the next Matt Milano, and he's pretty much guaranteed to be a Buffalo Bill from what I've seen on Twitter. So it's going to answer everything for us.
Obviously, clearly. I've seen Danny Stutzman. I've seen DeGiorgio, John DeGiorgio. Obviously, Paul Posluszny is already been thrown out there. And then I want to know what Bills fans are going to do when Sean Dolak takes Joe Andreessen's roster spot. Is that going to implode upon itself? Is that going to everyone's just going to collapse within itself? I don't know.
Tough day for the Mafia.
The Take Industrial Complex will be able to survive it.
Tough.
All right, so those were all the cap creating moves. So releases of Sam Martin and Von Miller, trade of Kaiir Elam, restructure of Ed Oliver, pay cut for Matt Milano. Those 5 moves all together created 16 million or 26 million in cap space. So nice combination of moves. The next set that also created some cap space were the extensions you guys got to go over. So obviously the biggest one was a 4-year, $6.5 million extension for Reed Ferguson. Good for Reed. I only joke in that he had always been kind of the butt of those jokes of hey, why don't you go wait in the parking lot and we'll re-sign you tomorrow guy, because I've talked about it on lots of shows where no team wants to replace a long snapper last minute. So the long snapper has a weird, unspoken sense of security, but also the team knows the long snapper is not going to go anywhere else and they're veterans. So it's just a weirdly safe spot. Yeah. However, fortunately for Reed, because that was always kind of unfair that it got announced that he got released, even if informed fans knew it didn't mean anything. It was change in the CBA that now you don't need to wait and carry guys onto the 53 and then put them on injured reserve the next day. Now you can put them on the in-season injured reserve straight out of camp, and you don't need to do that shenanigans thing. So Reed got a 4-year extension. He even got a little bit of a pay bump. He got a $1.5 million signing bonus spread out over 4 years. So
some more steaks for the grill.
Yeah, it was a Grills Mafia, and him and our man Iman, they can grill up a little bit more extra meat and some more rubs on their delicious items. But just well deserved in the longest reigning Buffalo Bill. And my comment every single time, this now takes him from age 30 to 34, which is totally fine for long snappers. That is very, very common. And my best compliment to Reed all the time is, I never think about snaps ever. I don't ever think about them. I don't worry about them. I don't even give them a second thought. I know it's going to be fine.
That Rams game. But other than that, yes, that one snap bothered me. Everything else, he's done great. Right here, Ryan, I've said this for years. I'm a total hypocrite because how much I love the NFL. I'll never allow my kids to play football. But if I did let my kids play football, I would train them to be absolute beasts as long snappers. Because it's
the Kevin Ferguson plan.
It's the way of life, man.
Kevin got his 2 boys free college and decade-long NFL careers by just training them to snap from the time they were in middle school. Mm-hmm. It was genius. He deserves praise It's genius parenting.
I've been on this since like I was in my teens. I remember talking with a guy I worked with at Sears. I was like, if you want a career in football, teach your kid how to long snap. Like, there's not a lot of competition for it. It's not sexy. They don't get hit. It's the way. Like, and every team needs one.
Yes. 32 jobs. Yeah. 32 jobs. Obviously then we had your man Khalil Shakir, fantastic. That one was announced as like 4 years, 60 million, and it turns out it's really like 4 years, 53 million, and then some incentives, and even beyond that, it's actually 3 years, 28 million, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
So they have this year for 3 million and change, and then 2 years at 25 million, and then we'll see where it goes. Now he's the kind of player
in like 2 years.
The kind of player, the kind of leader, the security blanket for Josh Allen that I would very much expect him to see all 5 of these years, and probably another contract after that. But the reality is we're going to pay him like 11.2 million a year over the next 5 years, which is an absolutely amazing deal.
It's gonna look like a great deal.
Incredible value. Impossible to be upset with this. I know I had a couple of people that try to talk about him like he was some like replaceable, you could just get any mid-round pick to do what he does, and that's completely underselling. One, he's not some little slot receiver. He's the same size or slightly bigger than Stephon Diggs was. And he has consistently fantastic yards after catch, which is not some given. Like his efficiency metrics have been fantastic the whole
He's
time.
like barely a poor man's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah, like he's right on the cusp of
his metrics are the same. The metrics tell you that if he got the same volume, if he just played in Detroit's offense, he would do what Amon-Ra St. Brown does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think more will be unlocked when we talk about some of the. We talked about this last week. Like a guy like Josh Palmer, like some of what I think the team wants to do is only going to unlock more for Shakir.
Yes. Obviously, Terrel Bernard, right there, same idea. That one I think had a little bit more concern when it came out. It was 4 years, 50 million. That was no discount. That was literally the exact number I projected was 12.5 million. 4 years, 50 million. But that one, the same thing. It's actually 4 years, 42 million. Which means we have this next year at 3 million, and then that one. So it's 5 years at 45 million. We're going to have him, and even beyond that, it's really 3 years, 22 million, and we'll see.
Yeah.
So it's going to be this year for 3 million, 2 more years at 18 million, and then we'll see where it goes. So tons of flexibility. He has not trapped himself in any of these deals. They have outs in each of them, and most likely we're going to pay Terrel Bernard $9 million a year for the next 5 years, which is fantastic value.
If you want to see where that value lies even a little bit more than what we know in terms of the eye test and what you can see from the metrics, is after this show, go listen to Film Room and the interview they did with Bernard. The guy's just you can see it, the passion, the student of the game, and that's what you need as your captain in the middle, calling the defense. Like I think sometimes as fans we forget. Like it's not just like run to the ball. There's so much that goes into it, and to know the type of guy and the mind that he is setting this defense up. And I see it. The first thing I do every week, Greg, is jump into the film, and I see him just like a maestro, just orchestrating the defense with every snap, every play, every motion. And he talks about it in detail with Eric and Anthony. It's a great interview. You should check it out after here. But if you were feeling any kind of way about the value of him, watch that interview, and I think you'll feel even a lot better.
Yeah. And this is a high bar because Eric and Anthony have done some fantastic shows. It might have been the best show they've done. Like Probably. It was so good. And just what a banger of guests coming out. They had Michael Hoyt literally like the day after he signed with the Bills. They had Terrel Bernard. They've got another big one coming up here that you guys are going to love to see. So a lot of really good, awesome work by Eric and Anthony. It was really fantastic. The next one was a bigger one, but at a much safer number than I expected. Gregory Rousseau, 4 years, 80 million. That one was by far the closest to the truth. Like that one really was 4 years, 80 million. You know, it's with the guarantees, it's 3 years, 43 million, and then we'll see. But it was still a very, very clean deal. In reality, it's probably going to be 5 years, 93 million, like 18.6 million a year, which again, you're talking about him being paid as like the 22nd highest paid edge rusher by the time all these new extensions and everything are done. So Gregory Rousseau is a good player. And I think you've been very adamant that there's more here than what we're going to see. I think it's very, very, very possible we could see a 14, 15 sack season from a guy like him. And the rest of the metrics where he is in his pressures, quarterback hits, on top of the fact that out of all the pass rushing defensive ends, he might arguably be the best run defender, if not for sure top 3 out of those top 25, 30 pass rushers. He is, in being fair, he's in that 20 to 25th range. He's like one of the better, but at the lower end of a defensive end one, if you want to call it that. He consistently ranks 20th to 25th in pass rushing, but all the guys with him or above him, he's number 1 to number 3 in every run defending metric, run stops, run tackle efficiency, all the different things that the advanced metrics measure for run defense. He's number 1 out of those guys, plus is a top 25 pass rusher. And I think a lot of those things indicate you could see some of those spike seasons from him in the future where he has consistent low end double digit and maybe a 15 sack season once in his career.
Yeah, sacks are weird. I'm never gonna stop pounding that drum that sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to why a guy gets 8 versus 12 sacks. Like they're a super weird thing. Pressures matter. He does a pretty good job pressuring. The Bills struggled this year as a whole unit, and I think
terrible finishing.
Yeah, I think it also had to do with the back end. I think the ball was coming out pretty quick. I think guys were getting open pretty quick. I think they're going to try to fix that this year, but I'm high on Group. I think he's an ascending talent. I've seen it every single year, development of him as a player. He ranked 9th in Havoc, which is total of all those types of plays, which I think matters more. We only focus on the sacks from edge, and I get it. Like that's what the top guys get paid the most for, and you want to see it. But there's so much more that goes into that play. And in Havoc, he was right behind Myles Garrett, who was at 8th. He was at 9th. And I think we forget that this is a guy that was playing cornerback or playing wide receiver and tight end in high school, and then recently became an edge player and then had the COVID year. So he's a young developing dude who's still kind of like growing into his body. And that type of trait that he has that they drafted him to have, this is kind of the same thing that we did with, I was really down on Spencer Brown. When you have a guy with those traits and he's shown some ability to develop, like you can't redraft those traits. And if he's ascending into that body and those traits, like I want to see this play out because I do think that it could be very special. And this is something you and I offline have kind of been back and forth on, like, where are we on Joey Bosa? But if you're high on Joey Bosa, that should be an indicator that Groot is going to continue to ascend. Like if Joey Bosa is a guy that's going to require chips, require a little extra attention, we did not have that last year. Even as good as Vaughn was on those third downs and stuff like that, like there wasn't a lot of attention being drawn anywhere else on the line. And so if Bosa can get to that kind of elite state, even if it's just late in the year, that should help Groot to also exceed and continue to ascend.
Yeah. So it's something that we'll see where he's utilized. Connor would like to see him used on Hail Mary defense. So some creative utilization.
Okay.
So Connor, that happens like twice a season, maybe. So I wouldn't count that in his utilization, but by all means, if they want to throw his wingspan back there, sure. Yeah. So the next one that comes up obviously is the biggest one. Joshua Patrick Allen, 6 years, $330 million, $250 million guaranteed. People were really confused by this. I even had to talk to some national guys. I had a bunch of people in my DMs asking for what this is or why they did it. It comes down to nothing more complex. Actually being talked about it on the Fitz and Wit podcast. It was, they knew Josh needed to be redone. Patrick Mahomes is going to get the same thing. They're going to redo his with 4 or 5 years left on his. When they signed those crazy long-term deals that helped the team, this was the easiest way to redo it. In reality, they added 2 years and $200 million onto the end of this deal. He had 4 years and $130 million left in actual payments. And they were going to, of course, redo that in the way that they're doing this. So instead of just tacking, inflated gross years to the end that he wasn't going to get, in all reality, they didn't rip up, but they added extra money onto each of the next 4 years plus 2 years onto the end so they can spread it out in cap hits. It created some cap space this year. It made his number next year more reasonable. It gave them options each season to be able to shuffle some of this money around and be able to create more cap space. And it rightfully got Josh into the right area. He easily could have raked the team over the coals and force them to make him the highest paid player in average annual value. He settled for only getting the second most money at $55 million, but $5 million a year behind Dak Prescott. But the important part for the players is he got the most guaranteed money ever. $250 million guaranteed is enormous. He got $250 million guaranteed. So getting that over these next years is just a huge achievement, and acknowledgement of his MVP season, his franchise status, and everything there. And, of course, his benevolence as a Buffalonian, that he didn't rake the team over the coals to go for every single penny.
Yes. I say it all the time. He's the most valuable asset in Western New York. Half jokingly, I say it, but he's close. He's right there. I am a little bit annoyed with like what a great guy he is for taking 250 million guaranteed. Like, he still made a lot of money. Like, yes, could he have gone further and forced the team to make the ticker look better for him? Sure. That would also be stupid. Like, he's not like,
I fully expected 6 years, 366 million, which is just 61 times 6, because I thought it was going to be the most guaranteed ever and the highest paid player in NFL history. Like, I thought his agent, I know for a fact his agent wanted that headline. Yeah. But the fact that Josh settled for only getting the most guaranteed money ever is funny, that we get to frame it as him being kind and benevolent. And
yes, and it's great that his agent actually, like, I'm sure you're right that he wanted that, but it looks better for him. But yeah, no, I kind of like, at some point, like at first I was like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad he's on the same page. And then after like a week of it, I was like, all right, this is a little eye rolly. Like,
it's still
the guy made a lot of money. He's doing all right. Yeah.
Doing just fine. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to get into, there's a couple of, most of these are additions, but some of them were actually guys who we allowed to hit free agency that we signed back very quickly. Rest in peace to the Ty Johnson exodus. There was about a 6-hour period where I had to answer 24 messages on why we signed Darrynton Evans instead of Ty Johnson, and I was so confused why people were... the need for fans for every single free agent signing to mean something super impactful. So whether it was even a little bit more money, like a Lyle Collins in the past, or, you know, we've seen other names come through where we said, like, the order they sign guys just doesn't mean that much. It just doesn't mean that much. So now that we know, Darrynton Evans got a $15,000 guarantee. He got a $15,000 signing bonus. There are people listening to this podcast who got bigger bonuses this year than $15,000. So that lets you know how much that guarantees his roster spot here. And then 6 hours later, they signed Ty Johnson to a 2-year, $5 million deal. That happened right around the same time as Reggie Gilliam also signing on that one. We don't know the details, but it was reported as a 1-year, $2 million deal. I'm going to assume it's right around there. Maybe there's some, little tweaks beyond there, but happy to have this running back group back. Gilliam has played the most special team snaps 2 years in a row. That is a job that needs to happen. So whether that's a linebacker or a Taiwan Jones running back, or a not Matt Collins, I'll use a different guy, like a previous special teams, wide receiver that isn't really a wide receiver, or isn't really Marcus Easley, or isn't really a running back, or Tyler Matakevich, who isn't really a linebacker. Reggie Gilliam is that guy, but he really is a fullback and can really play some fullback snaps and some tight end 3 snaps, and we actually get that benefit of him playing that role, and a guy that we would need anyways to play the most special team snaps. So I'm perfectly happy with that job. And I'm actually really happy that Ty Johnson, I have a feeling we offered Ty Johnson and Matt Collins the exact same contracts, and Ty took it, and Matt got offered, instead of 2 years, $5 million, he got offered 2 years, $10 million from the Patriots. And I'm not going to begrudge a guy for getting $10 million instead of $5 million.
Yeah, no, go for it. Happy to have all these guys back. And to your point about Evans, like we talked about it leading up to free agency. If you go through the lists of signed free agents year in and year out, probably only like 40% of these guys are going to stick and work out for this team. Like there's going to be a lot of misses in this, as excited as we are about each guy. Luckily this year, the numbers are kind of low outside of the guys. We know the guys they brought back roughly are what they are. But some of these guys aren't even going to make the team this summer. Some of them are just not going to be the players that we think they're going to be. There's going to be more misses than there are hits in the free agency period. So to me, that was like, okay, the team likes him. They'll have him around for the summer, but there's probably not going to be a roster spot for this guy.
Yeah. One more low-end offensive guy, Kendrick Green, was signed. He's this year's Lyle Collins, this year's Russell Bodine. We've had lots of these guys come. Will Clapp is more on the positive side of things, although Will Clapp did get a contract. Good for him. I will be kind of surprised if Kendrick Green cracks the starting lineup or the roster, the 53-man roster, but I could totally see him being Will Clapp on the practice squad.
I think he could be
Aaron Cromer's next pet project.
A guy that comes back, hangs out on the practice squad, is an insurance policy for you.
Was a day 2 pick, so he has not played at that level. He has not earned that at all. But was, obviously had the scouting high end potential that people like coming out. So we'll see if Cromer can turn him into, I would say the high end outcome there is, could he be in that line of David Edwards, Alec Anderson, 6th man jumbo offensive lineman someday? I think that would be like the ceiling for a guy like Green. And most likely he's just a veteran backup.
Yeah.
One more on offense before we go to the defensive side of the ball. Actually, I'll add in one more smaller one. Laviska Shenault was one that happened after the show last time. He was signed. He's listed as a wide receiver. He's not a wide receiver. Like, he is just a return specialist, but I would caution people not to underestimate that, specifically because in the same way that Mike Tomlin, when he was on the competition committee and like right after the new kick return rule got adopted, like the next day he signed Cordarrelle Patterson. I don't think it's an accident that Sean McDermott was in the competition committee meeting where they talked about shifting the touchback from the 30 to the 35, and that was always the threshold the special teams coaches talked about, where, well, if you're going to put it at the 30 and the average return comes out to the 27 or 28, we won't risk it that you're going to return one. We'll just kick it into the end zone and give you the extra 2 or 3 yards. But if that's at the 35 and it's an extra 7 or 8 yards, that was the threshold where you would see way more pop-up kicks to the 1, 2, 3 yard line and make them return it. Laviska Shenault was a top 10 returner last year in return yards and average, is only a kick returner. So it would be Brandon Codrington as the punt returner and Laviska Shenault as the kick returner this year. But that kick return job is going to matter more this year than it has in recent past. I think there's a chance we see like record amounts of kick returns. I think that's going to become a much bigger job in NFL games going forward. So rolling the dice with, I'm going to assume there's very little to almost no guarantees, maybe more than Darrington Evans. Maybe he gets more than 15,000, but maybe he got like 100,000 signing bonus. I'm guessing he's a minimum contract, but I do think it's a possibility that if they think he's a material amount better at that job than a Ty Johnson or a Ray Davis or whoever else they might want to try out, KJ Hamler will try for that. I think Brandon Codrington will try for the kick return. I think he's better at punt return. But I do think there's probably a higher chance of there being a kick return specialist only type job as wide receiver 6 on the team than what maybe people were initially assuming.
I hate it. I do not want to take up 2 roster spots for return.
2 returners
in that way. Yeah, and I just don't. And I understand what you're saying. I understand the logic behind it, but I don't love it. I also
think it's very possible that Ty Johnson is just that guy.
I think he can be, and he obviously gives you actual value in game as well. Just the way the NFL is right now in terms of game day active spots, those last spots are super valuable, and it pops up all the time how valuable it is. And it just feels like back in the Rex Ryan days when they had a kickoff specialist and a kicker.
That one is
that drove,
at least. The
At least this would
return
have
one,
some
I
value.
can.
Sure.
Yes, I can. That's more value
That was
than
the
a kickoff
worst
specialist. That just meant you had a terrible kicker.
That was maybe the worst roster management of all time. Having
Yes.
that, but
That's way worse.
Yeah, way worse. But similar annoyance to me to have to take up a roster spot for something so specific. But again, if it is going to matter, I don't know what the difference between the 10th best returner and having Codrington and Ty Johnson back there doing it is. So I would hope that they can settle on one and that this is just more a competition to push those guys in the summer. It is my hope versus he actually gets a spot.
Yeah, and I'm going to put it at, I don't think he has a better than 50-50 shot, but I also think it's probably like a 30% chance. Sure. I think the most likely is that it's Ty Johnson and Codrington get it because they're already there, and that's just better roster spot utilization and better roster construction. But the reason I highlight it is I do think that role matters more this year, and them throwing some assets at finding out, hey, let's make sure we feel like we have a good returner is a thing. It is something that's going to be real. So,
and since Hardy's going to be our cornerback too, you probably don't want him. No, just kidding.
Hopefully that is something where we agree we do have a really good kick returner. It's Brandon Codrington, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson. That would be the easier of the two.
Yep.
Our final offensive signing was the biggest, actually the biggest overall free agent signing and our biggest offensive signing, Joshua Palmer. He is a receiver from the Los Angeles Chargers. He's a guy that I think is a little different than fans realize. I don't think a ton of fans watch all the Chargers games. He was kind of stuck behind Mike Williams and Keenan Allen for a little bit. A lot of people thought there'd be a little bit more of a breakout this year. There was a little bit of health issues and just a weird Greg Roman offense. A lot of the underlying metrics show that he's got some potential there. I would say, to me, he's a better, younger Mac Hollins. Like, I think that he's a good outside receiver that can get open, make plays. He actually played special teams for them. He's a really good run blocker, and I think he's a better receiver than Mac Hollins.
He's like 10 years younger.
And much younger than what he is. And then there's some advanced metrics that could show there could be more than that. I don't know how much more than that there is. I do think if this season goes the way we want, and Keon Coleman takes a step forward, Khalil Shakir is another nice piece, Dalton Kincaid is healthy and doing closer to what we expected him to do, and Josh Palmer fits in there where some games he's the number one or number two target, and then some games he's just a nice to have in where we need him. I think that's fine. If some fans are upset with how much we paid for that, I won't begrudge them. His contract is, in reality, like, it's a $4.3 million cap hit this year. The real contract is 2 years, $22 million, and then we'll see. He's going to get these 2 years and $22 million, so $11 million a year. I think that's slightly more than I would want to pay for him, but anytime you bring in a new player from outside in free agency, you're going to pay more than what you want to pay. That wasn't some gross overpayment. He is a good receiver. He's going to contribute. I think he's better than some fans realize. His separation numbers look pretty good. Some of the advanced metrics show a guy who was capable of more but not utilized well in a Greg Roman offense. We've seen bad Greg Roman offenses. I'll tell myself that that's what we're getting here. I'm not expecting a ton of ceiling or a ton of upside or some sneaky breakout wide receiver one, but I think he's going to be a really nice, like, in the way that Mac Hollins was a pleasant surprise last year. His bar is going to be a little bit higher because the contract was higher, but I think he's going to be a pleasant surprise for a lot of fans who had never heard of him or didn't know anything of him. They're going to see, a sneaky 6'1", 205 and get separation on the outside and make some big plays. They're going to be, oh, who's this guy? And going to be a little bit excited.
Yeah, I'm actually super excited about this signing. One, too, like, look at what Mac Hollins got out on the market. I think this is a younger player that is actually better than Mac Hollins. I know we love Mac Hollins in terms of the personality that he brought, and he was pleasant surprise in some of the games, and some of the ability to have some production. But this is a guy that can do all those things, and so I think this is similar to the conversation we have about Groot and sacks, that like, yeah, the production's not there, but it's more than just the production of yardage and things like that. Like being able to block, being able to be a special teams player, being able to be something that they don't actually have in that room, which is a guy that has size, that can get down the field, that can create some of that, take the top off the defense. He can separate from man coverage, which was an issue why they got Amari Cooper in that trade. They were having trouble with guys like Keon Coleman's never going to be a guy that creates separation in man coverage. He's going to be a guy that is going to be a 50-50 dude that's going to have to go up and get it. You're going to have this now who, when I talked to Cody Alexander, I was on the Field Vision podcast a couple weeks ago now. He was saying in terms of their metrics, he's one of the better. He didn't get a lot of the targets and there wasn't a ton of production, but in terms of getting open down the field, he was there. And when a defensive coordinator games plans for your team, it doesn't always matter whether or not it is something that hits a lot. Those are low efficiency plays, right? The 20 air yard throws, all that stuff's low efficiency plays. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're hitting on those all the time or there's a huge amount of production. Having the threat of that, which is something the Bills really haven't had, is a tool. It is a weapon. So I think he is going to be one of these guys that frustrates fans, that will still probably have limited numbers and the production won't be crazy, but will pull gravity, will pull some stuff and give the Bills an option that they didn't have. Where if teams don't respect it, it will be there and the production will come. But if teams do respect it, it will open up stuff for Khalil Shakir up the seam. It will open up some stuff for Dalton Kincaid as he's pulling a safety downfield. And so I think it's a chess piece type of a player for the Bills and a piece that they didn't already have in that room. There's a lot of similarities in some of the stuff that they have in the room. And I feel like this rounds out the room really well. Like you said, with Coleman, with how Shakir plays and with Dalton Kincaid, I think it's just a nice addition to what they're doing. I think it's going to allow them to do other stuff. And I think other people's production will go up because of him being on the field.
Yeah. So we have back-to-back comments in the chat that are great to be able to use as an example. Andy saying Palmer underutilized the Charger. He could be like Diggs used to be, but less targets. He's not nearly the receiver Stephon Diggs is, and I guess maybe some of the utilization, less targets, I'm sure. He does create separation and gets open, but he's nowhere near the player Stephon Diggs was when he got here or anytime during his tenure. Although RJ, obviously, not shockingly, is at the other end of the spectrum, reminds me of Sherfield and Hardy. That's just incorrect. He has more production than both of them combined in their entire career. So he's had multiple very good receiving seasons. Neither of those guys had any production.
I agree with K. Omari here. And I think one of the problems for his lack of production was, one, playing behind guys, two, injury, but also I think Chargers needed like a true wide receiver one last year, and they didn't have, none of those guys were it. I don't think Quentin Johnson is, and they fed Quentin Johnson like he was
trying to see if he could be, because they used a first round pick.
And Palmer definitely isn't, and the Bills don't need him to be wide receiver one,
and so didn't pay him like one. They paid him as a wide receiver, 2.5 wide receiver 3. Like that's what those guys get paid.
Yep.
All right, so that's it for the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, I think this could be a fun spot for our friends over at William Mattar Law Offices and some of the here to help pieces here, because I do think we added more on the defensive side of the ball of what's here to help. So I'm going to start with some of the explanations of some of the positions. So there's a couple different rules that came into play with some of the guys that we signed. The first was 2 of the safeties. We brought back DeMar Hamlin, and we added Derek Forrest. Derek Forrest was out of Cincinnati. He was a guy that I liked in the draft. Honestly, God, I didn't even know he went to Washington when he went there. So I certainly didn't keep track of his play, but had a little bit of time to do some research and talk to some guys there. He was a guy who actually in 2022 under Ron Rivera had a really nice season and looked like a steal and a future high-end starter for them. Then got hurt, and then they made the change over with their new coaching staff and defensive scheme. Never really got the job back or a shot at it. A lot of fans were kind of frustrated in that. We had a lot of way more fans talking about Derek Forrest than like any of the other guys that we signed. And Commanders fans being upset that they lost him. He was one of those RAS guys, high-end athleticism, throws his body around. His highlights are awesome because they're huge, like, you got jacked type hits that he lit people up. I do think that there's some fun upside there, but his contract tells us that they're not expecting much either. They paid him the minimum. He's going to play special teams, be a crazy good athlete, and if they get anything more than that, it's gravy. I saw people throwing out that, well, Jordan Poyer wasn't thought of as much when he got here either. Sure. That's not what's going to happen here. But if
The
he
Bills
turns
thought of
into a guy,
Poyer as much when
correct,
they signed him, right? Like,
correct. And they paid him, even in that moment, they paid him like a 4-year deal and a lot more money than they paid Derek Forrest.
Yeah.
So, but I get the desire to connect the athleticism and the size and the hitting and the, didn't get the opportunity to come back because of health. Like, sure, there's some dots you can connect there.
Sure.
I do think he has a better chance of making the roster than some of the other Darrington Evans, Kendrick Green. He probably even better than Laviska Shenault. I think he's got a pretty good shot at that 4th safety spot. We'll see how the draft goes. And has the chance there. They use what's called the veteran salary benefit on these two. The NFL created a kind of little loophole where you can pay up to 2 players a combination of, it's a little bit more than $1 million this year, of additional cash that you don't have to count towards the cap. So they created it so that there were some minimum salary spots where you could pay veteran players more than 4-year plus experience, but they count against the cap as a 2-year minimum player. So these two, DeMar Hamlin and Derek Forrest, will count against the cap like they were picked behind Cole Bishop and picked behind Dwayne Carter in the draft. They count less than those guys in cap hits, as if they're going into their 3rd year as like 4th, 5th, 6th round picks. Minimum, actually, like 7th round picks. So I think that's a neat little loophole that they created there. They gave Dane Jackson maybe an extra $800,000. They gave Derek Forrest an extra like $250,000. But he counts less against the cap again. That's not a guarantee that he's going to make it. $250,000 isn't going to help with that, but it does show the intention that he signed here because he got a little bit of extra money and because they told him that you have a better chance of making the roster.
Yeah. RJ asks here, is he more of a box safety? I don't think so. I actually think he's more of I think he could be interchangeable in the way that
I think people see the big hits and equated that to a box safety.
Yeah.
Because he does make big highlight hits.
I think his range is better as a free safety type. But I think he could be interchangeable. He did a little bit of both in that one.
The same way we would always get into it on, is Poyer more box or is Hyde more free safety? Because you see the style of play and the athleticism, but really they were way more interchangeable and way closer to 50-50 than what people would want to remember, because Poyer made more like game-breaking plays a lot of times coming downhill for hits and for fumbles and for interceptions, and people think of the center field Willie Mays interception against the Patriots and they think of Poyer or Hyde that way, but really they were more interchangeable. Forrest is like that, so yes, maybe some of his athleticism and power equates there, but his range actually plays better center field.
Yeah, I think any split safety has got to do both. So
if you want to play, you do.
If you're in a split safety defense, you're going to have to do both things. I didn't get to talk about Forrest much when we were on the last show because I just didn't even get a chance to watch him by the time the show came up with all the other free agents. And so dug in a little bit more. I agree with you, Greg, that I understand why people are excited about him. I do think that
for a minimum contract, this is a great upside swing where there's no downside. This is the kind of guy you want to sign for a minimum contract.
Sure. And I do think this is going to be one of those things this summer where maybe like Andy's comment, like, oh, he should be competing for a starting job. I think there could be a chance that, especially with Rapp not being able to stay healthy, like there's a chance that it could be a summer like we saw last year where DeMar Hamlin came out of nowhere competing for that job when nobody thought.
Forrest leapfrogging DeMar Hamlin for safety 3 instead of safety 4 is probably more of his ceiling than beating out Rapp or Bishop for a starting spot.
Yes, I think it's I think one thing we discount about the safety position specifically in this defense is how hard it is to learn this defense and familiarize yourself and get the coach's trust in that way. So that's going to be a little bit of a hurdle for him. What I would love to see out of a guy like Forrest would be to eliminate the Cam Lewis role. I'm not a huge fan of Cam Lewis's play, and I think that Forrest could be a bit of a hybrid defender in that way.
Mess
And
around in the overhang and then that nickel.
play some specialty, be the
Joker.
dime guy. Maybe I think he has athleticism to
Dime
do
linebacker.
it. And so that's kind of when I was watching him, that's the vision that I saw more than like a guy that's going to be a competitor for the starter. But I think that would be a way where he could stick onto this roster and really solidify himself as kind of being that hybrid safety for them, special teamer. And I think he's got all the traits to do that. And he's still young enough where if he can stick on the roster in that way, I think what they want to go into the season is Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop. I don't know if they'll draft. Maybe they'll draft. Maybe it will fall into their lap in the first couple of rounds where they can't not take
I'm
a
expecting
guy.
one of the first 4 or 5 picks, whether it's the first or 2 seconds, I don't know, but one of those 4th rounders, I expect one of those first 5 picks to be a safety.
Yeah,
and if the best guy on the board is a safety in the first round at pick 30, they will absolutely do it.
It might. And that would make it a lot harder for Forrest this summer. But
that might end it.
Yeah, unless he can take away that Cam Lewis role, right?
Sure.
Like
as the
and
10th
be that guy.
DB.
Yes, and that's where if I was him, that's what I would try to attack as a way to get on this roster. And in watching him on film, I saw that like, hey, this could be a way better version of what the Bills have tried to do there.
And if a Daquan Hardy or a Brandon Codrington can play backup nickel, that could also create some of that flexibility.
Yep.
Do you want to? Noah here was saying Rapp hardly gets interceptions. I think he had like wasn't he great in the Havoc score when you do like tackles for loss, sacks, forced fumbles, recovered fumbles, right now, interceptions.
At one point, he was like top 3.
He was exceptional with it. So that's not correct, Noah. That's not correct.
No, he's a
Taylor Rapp was one of the better playmaking safeties in the league overall last year.
He ended up at 14th, but he got hurt. Right. Yeah. And so this is
based. He literally intercepted Lamar Jackson in the playoffs in a critical spot.
Although Lamar kind of gifted him that one. But yes, he did. He definitely did. He's a playmaker. I said all along when he is healthy and playing, he wasn't playing healthy at the end of the year. Like we got to remember that a little bit too. He got banged up towards the end of the year. He missed some time. And that is a legitimate problem.
That's why you want lottery tickets like Derek Forrest and a 4th round pick. Like that's what I want there to have there is like, hey, in case Rapp's not healthy, you have the low end floor guy of Hamlin, but you also have a ceiling guy as an athletic draft pick and a Derek Forrest.
Yeah, I have concerns about the safety room. I really do. In terms of like
we don't have the upside we used to.
Hope is not a plan. You say it all the time. Like we need Cole Bishop to develop into the player that we assume that he can be. There were some signs of it last year, but it wasn't all there. It was up and down. It was a little shaky at times. And Rapp, when healthy, I do think he's a playmaker. I think he's really good. I don't know that he can stay healthy, and that is a concern to me. So there's definitely some chinks in the armor in that room, and it is not free from early draft pick or adding to it in more of a substantial way. And so that I'm going to be super interested to see how that plays out here as we dip into mocks and start getting into the draft.
Oh yeah, TP and Adam here talking about. I know Anthony Prohaska is an enormous Malachi Starks fan. Just getting dangerous enough to know who the players are in the draft here. But he's the kind of guy that if he was on the board at 30 and a Derek Harmon and a Kenneth Grant and the other guy, the Amos and the corners that we want, those guys, like the premium positions aren't there, and a guy of the talent of Starks is there. Yeah. Hey, guess what? Malachi Starks is our new starting safety. There you go. Right. I could see a guy like Watts out of Notre Dame in the 2nd round being one of those 2nd round picks, and he's just the best guy on the board. Totally could see that being a possibility.
RJ, I don't know how to say it in any other ways, but like you have to do both. If Cole Bishop is not going to be a free safety, he's not going to play safety for the Buffalo.
He's not going to be the dime linebacker either. Like that's
he's not going to be. Yes. So it's a too high defense. That's what they want to run. The safeties have to be interchangeable in those situations where they do play a single high look, which they are going to do. So
also he was their 2nd round pick for a reason. They expect him to be. They expect him to be better than Taylor Rapp.
Yeah.
So they might be wrong, but that's what they're expecting him to do.
Yeah.
Right. They brought back Dane Jackson. I'll let you talk about this.
Yeah, I don't know why people are mad about it. Dane Jackson's a fine fit for this team. Like
they didn't pay him any money. He got 1 year. He might have got $2 million. I don't even know. We don't know yet.
Yeah,
he didn't get any money.
This is a perfect case of actually Dane Jackson's career has played out pretty awesome for him. Right, he came to Buffalo, was a perfect fit. Had to fill in, played admirably, played probably better than people remember at times. had to deal with being the guy like next to Trey White at a period of time where he was just getting picked on when Trey White was playing his best and balls were just going Dane Jackson's way, similar to how Levi Wallace was at a time. Really kept other guys, kept a Kaiir Elam off of cornerback too, like kept his job, is a really good fit. John Butler loves him, by the way. If you go listen to the Tim Graham and John Butler episode, after John Butler left the Bills, Tim Graham interviewed him. He's like, dude, Dane Jackson, like he kind of pointed out Dane Jackson as like the DNA that we're trying to find for this room to what you need to play corner. And then he went and got paid for that ability and it wasn't a good fit. They were playing him at like nickel. Carolina's a mess, right? Like when you turn on the tape, it's like, I saw him.
He helped get us a comp pick.
He got us a comp pick, but when like I said, they had him at some safety reps and stuff. And it's like, what are you guys doing? Like that's not who he is at all. It's not going to look good. So if you go look at his PFF grades, they're not going to look good if you got Dane Jackson and nickel. I promise you. He's fine for this defense. He's a total insurance floor. Do I want him as day one cornerback 2 to start the year? No, definitely not. I want them to be better at that position, but going into filling holes, which Brandon Beane wants to do, getting a Dane Jackson in the room is totally fine, especially when you send Kaiir Elam off. You still need bodies in that room.
And I mean, depending on, where your utilization and usage is, he's better than Kaiir Elam. So that's one of the elements and challenges here. The other is it depends what he ends up. Like people in the chat are, he's great as a CB4. Sure, if that's what he is. Right now, he's not. Right now, he's CB2. Yeah. He's the second best corner we have. Mm-hmm. So I wanted a guy that I felt, obviously, I think it's no secret, one of the first 3 picks of this draft are going to be a corner. So one of our first or second round picks, I think it's probably right there with defensive tackle is the most likely in the first round. If it's not, we might move up in the second to get one earlier. But somewhere in those top 60 picks, when we have 3 picks at 56 and 62 or at pick 30, one of those would be a corner. That guy will be expected to compete for a starting spot. I was hoping he would be competing with an Ahkello Witherspoon or a Jeff Okudah, or like someone who has been a little bit higher ceiling, higher trait starter than Dane Jackson, and then have the luxury of that guy as the backup. Right now, Ahkello Witherspoon signed back with the Rams today. That was the one that I thought had the most like Bills trait DNA. He's been on our list a couple times for target free agents. He made sense from there, but he just stayed with the Rams, which is no surprise. I know you had mentioned like Stephon Gilmore. Rasul Douglas is still out there. I think Okudah just signed. CJ Henderson might still be out there, but I don't know that they're going to add that and Dane Jackson. It's probably now just the draft, although I think Douglas is one where, depending on how the draft goes, maybe he could be brought back. I think that's possible. I think he certainly lost out on the payday that he was expecting or that some of the websites were proposing. And the one that gets asked about the most is, I think there is a very low percentage, but at some point, and Asante Samuel Jr.'s market is so deflated that he's going to look for a 1-year deal to rebuild that market and come back, and that it's possible he could pick somewhere like Buffalo to be that 1 year. I don't know if that crossover gets to the point where his number is low enough where we're like, okay, well, for that number, we'll do it. I don't know if we see that.
Yeah. And I mean, the Bills at the end of the year really harped on being able to tackle, and that's like his biggest deficiency. It would have to be
a White level tackler.
Yeah. I think they want better. I think that's why you got Dane Jackson. Like he's a pretty good tackler. So I think at this point it's in a draft. They've got some targets in the draft. It's a good draft for it. Maybe if
they could absolutely draft a starter in the second round at 56 or 62, they could draft a starting caliber player who could come in day one and start opposite Christian Benford.
Yeah. Trey Amos, hype train. Let's go.
There you go. All right. Just a couple left here. Now we are at the defensive line. So the first 2 are guys that I'm excited about, but it was a little, some people got a little deflated because of the news that came right afterwards. The Bills signed edge rusher, movable chess piece, new Lorenzo Alexander, Michael Hoyt. Also has already been on the Cover One Network on the film room. Fantastic job by Eric locking him in early, and they had a great job. That dude is like a really fun, entertaining guy. Great energy. He is a Toronto suburb resident, so is from this area, has been in this region for a long time, has been on the Rams, has been a nice, fun, movable chess piece. He's literally had I think 31 snaps in the slot. He's played stand-up linebacker. He's played defensive tackle. He's played edge rusher. It is very much like a Lorenzo Alexander type role where it's not the same as what we've seen before. And Eric liked it as, especially with a 3-year deal and $13.4 million guaranteed, it means that they intend to use him in some new stuff that maybe we haven't seen this whole time. And I think that's exciting to be able to see.
Yeah, I love him. I know the suspension's annoying to people, but this is more of a play for the next few years, right? You got to see the big picture. And the Bills, as much as people don't want to admit it, yes, they have to win all the games and wrap up the division and all that stuff. But the team a little bit is playing for January football and February football to some capacity. So like Bean said, they knew this one. They were willing to absorb that. What hurts is having two guys, one you didn't know, but they didn't have to sign Ogunjobi out. That deal wasn't done. They still decided that they were willing to live with that suspension. So it is what it is. But what really got me excited for Hoyt too is one, Greg Cosell was raving about the type of football player he is. And I think Greg Cosell is the number one smartest analyst when it comes to football and breaking down film that exists. And so if he raves about a player, I'm all aboard. But then was when I did watch every Joey Bosa snap. And I could see the vision of running some stunts with the two of those types of guys. And I think that's where Joey's probably going to succeed the most. I think that he got a lot of success in running some stunts and using that power to push the pocket, collapse the pocket. And Hoyt also has some of that success. So I think you can pair those up and then allow Groot and Ed to play some games on the other side. That type of stuff really excites me. And so that's where I got excited for this move.
There will be snaps next year where Greg Rousseau on one side, Joey Bosa on the other, Michael Hoyt coming in at pass rush defensive tackle, and Ed Oliver, they will collapse the pocket like a pop can.
Yeah.
Just
and Hoyt also allows you to, with that size at 6'4", 270, I think is something he's playing at. With the Bills struggle to stay, they want to stay in nickel, but they don't have the size to stay in nickel. I think he gives you the size on the edge on those early downs where you can stay in nickel and still have big bodies to defend the run.
And when Greg Rousseau does need a break, and he did play a high snap count, he got into 75, 80% snap count, that's still 20, 25% when he's not on the field. Having a guy like Hoyt there as the backup for that is really valuable.
Yeah.
The same thing, when Ed Oliver comes off the field, it's nice to have a true disruptor at defensive tackle. That's what Larry Ogunjobi is. I think he played out of position in Pittsburgh as a 4-eye, 3-4 defensive end almost.
Yeah.
His usage in Cleveland and Cincinnati is going to be much closer to what we utilize him for here in Buffalo. And he was much better in Cleveland and Cincinnati than he was in Pittsburgh. I don't see him as I think he's a one tech, like some people wanted, like Jordan Phillips to be a one tech because he's big. I think Ogunjobi is a disruptive backup 3 tech. I think he has some of the power and size that in a pinch we can ask him to play that. But I think he's more of a disruptor there. We'll see. Maybe we do use him there. That's my number one want in the draft is a Derek Harmon, a Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, whatever it is. I want a big, powerful defensive tackle, and then those guys can all rotate. You can use them where they want, when Daquan's in, when that guy's in, when Ogunjobi's in, or obviously Ed Oliver will play a high snap count. But again, when Ed Oliver comes off the field, which he got up there, same 70+% snaps last year, I expect that again with Oliver and Rousseau. It's nice that on the other 30% of snaps, we can have a guy who can really disrupt, like Ogunjobi.
Yeah, he's better than Jordan Phillips, straight up.
There you go.
And so it's an improvement.
Austin Johnson, Quentin Jefferson. He's a significant upgrade on those guys.
Yeah, I do think they'll attack him in the draft. But even if you don't, I do think that he can play some one tech and do it in the similar way Daquan Jones did when he was playing well in terms of that penetrating style of one tech. I do think he can come in and fill that in a void, or say Jones gets hurt again. I think he's capable of being that versatile piece on the interior, and that's going to matter. I think this is going to be a guy. The suspension hurts because I don't know if he'll be able to get into that groove, but late in the season, I think fans will be like, oh yeah, this paid off. This is a high motor guy that's penetrating and getting in and being disruptive. Fans are going to like that.
So you haven't heard me talk about the suspension yet, and that's because I don't care. I don't care at all. I'm going to stop just short of the galaxy brain of this is better that they got suspended, but I'm going to stop just short of that.
Yeah. It would have been better for Joey Bosa to have been one of the players to get suspended.
If I could have just traded their sample and like we just, hey Joey, you start week 7. We'll see you then. But it's prior to the suspension, I already had defensive tackle and defensive end as 2 of my highest top 4 draft needs. Defensive tackle was still my number 1. Before these signings, after these signings, I still wanted a defensive tackle. Before these signings, after these signings, I still wanted a defensive end. Guess what? I still want a defensive tackle and a defensive end. And now those rookies have to play more in the first 6 weeks. And the veterans, who I really only care how they contribute in the playoffs, now have 6 less games of wear and tear. And they cost 35% less. We're going to have like $3 million less in. So if you were upset about how much they cost this year, guess what? Now they cost like 35% less because we don't pay them. If the salary is that we don't know Ogunjobi's deal yet, it's $1.5 million that Michael Hoyt is going to lose. So his cap hit comes down by $1.5 million. I'm going to assume Ogunjobi's around the same range, maybe a little bit more. I'm actually guessing that's why the details haven't come out yet, is because I'm guessing that's being haggled over. Because if you do more salary, that comes off right now. If you do it as a signing bonus to decrease this year's cap hit, you get a credit back at the end of the year for the 35% of this year's prorated amount of the signing bonus. So either way, we either get it off of the salary now or you get a little bit less if it comes off the signing bonus, but you get a credit off of this year's portion of the signing bonus. I'm guessing that's what they're haggling over right now. So we're going to get them costing less. They're going to be more available and less wear and tear on there. And out of any position, if it was Josh Palmer and he wasn't going to have the reps with Josh Allen as a receiver and a quarterback, absolutely a big red flag. We saw the impact of Amari Cooper coming in midseason last year and the challenges there, and a better receiver than Josh Palmer. However, defensive line is, hey, you see the guy with the ball over there? Go get him. Now, are there going to be some things with twists and stunts in games? Sure. But he's not coming in week 17. He's coming in week 7. It's week 7. They're going to get to play 11 games together and then the playoffs. Like this is not a thing. Like the hand wringing. There are people saying that like this was a stain on Brandon Beane and on the organization, and that this was, it doesn't take away from all the other good that Brandon Beane's done, but this is an embarrassment. Like just the overwrought hand wringing and pearl clutching over a nothing burger drove me nuts. Yeah. This doesn't matter. It's not a thing.
Yeah, we got to stay off Twitter. That place.
Oh my god. And their backup defensive tackles and defensive ends. And the people will say, "Well, yeah, but we need to get the 1 seed and need to win it." Aaron, if you had to swear with 100% certainty, did Austin Johnson and Dwayne Smoot play in the Houston Texans and Baltimore Ravens loss last year?
Yeah, I don't know.
Would you be confident you could remember if our backup defensive tackle and defensive end signing played in those games we lost that we really needed?
I'm assume they didn't.
One did what? Yeah. One didn't. But nobody even remembers because it's a backup defensive tackle, defensive end.
Yeah, I'm in between where the people saying a stain on Brandon Beane and that it's a high horse. Like I do care a little bit. Like it's annoying. I want the full rotation. I want I also want to draft at these positions, but I don't want to just thrust the rookies in and get playing. I'm not one of those guys that's like, I need the rookies to be in and play. Like there could be a benefit to getting the playing time, but only if they're ready. And I do trust the staff to put guys in when they're ready for it. I'll I'm very excited about Hoyt. And so he's a guy that is a piece that I want to see them move around. Ogunjobi's one that I could live with or not. Like I don't think he's the type of player that's going to be a massive difference. He's more of a rotational guy, but I think there was a plan for Hoyt, and I think there's going to be into the future. I don't think it disrupts what that plan is going to be for him, but I wanted to see it right away. I won't lie. And I wanted to see it for the full season. Is it end of the world stuff? No. But I do hope that they address these in the draft so that they have a nice solid rotation, because defensive line was a huge issue last year, and it could still be early on if you don't have your full rotation. And what I don't want to happen is, I assume the Bills are playing for January. I assume that I don't need them to win the 1 seed. I just need them to win their division and get a playoff seat. But what I don't want to happen again is to have like some huge glaring hole on the defensive line where like it's a struggle on defense. They're not able to stop the run. All these things are still occurring, and they're kind of like they were 2 years ago, where they're like halfway through the season and you're kind of like fighting to unnecessarily make the playoffs. I want it to be easy. And for me to be easy is having everything at your disposal. And what this does though, too, is it stresses if you deal with any injuries early in the season. This stresses that rotation where you are pulling some guys in off the street to play. You're bringing an Austin Johnson back or whatever it is. And it's like,
I mean,
all annoying because you got a PD suspension.
The very literal application last year is Eli Ankow and Kingsley Jonathan would have played 6 games.
Yeah.
Okay. I just, I couldn't believe the overreaction.
The reaction's too much. I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, it's annoying. I'd rather be at full strength. I don't think there's necessarily a benefit. I half joke that Bosa would be a benefit, like only because of his struggle to stay healthy, but that also wouldn't have been. It's never good to not have your talent on, but it's not some blemish on.
Yeah, well, I mean, but Sean McDermott hates rookies, and now he's going to have to play the rookies because he doesn't have a choice because nobody else is on the roster.
He doesn't hate rookies. He will play them. That is also a misleading. We got to just get off Twitter. It's not a real place. It's not a real place with real opinions. It really isn't.
So anyways, we'll see when the official contract comes out for Ogunjobi, what those details come out at. I'm excited to see them. They're going to contribute. And guess what? Now our trade deadline edition that we're going to get in week 7, which is when the trade deadline is Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi. That's better than anybody we'd trade for. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
All right. The final signing I saved
until they trade for Jair Alexander. That'll be
Jair Alexander. Yeah. Clearly. So I was told Dexter Lawrence. That's what I was told.
And a Dexter Lawrence.
Both, clearly. So the final signing here is Joey Bosa. I believe his name has legally been changed to Joey Bosa when healthy. Because you literally can't have the conversation about him without it. Last year, his name was literally smack in the middle of the guys we were researching, which was like Josh Sweat, Chase Young, Gregory Rousseau. Joey Bosa was right there in the middle of those guys. The one caveat is that was him trying to play through a foot injury for most of last year and was his worst season of his career. So his worst season of his career in most of all the pass rush win rate and pass rush productivity and pressures and sacks and all the different pieces. The worst season of his career was the best season of Josh Sweat's career and the best season of Gregory Rousseau's career and the best season of Chase Young's career. That was Joey Bosa's worst season of his career. Now, the pessimistic side of that is he's been injured a bunch. He did play his most games in the last 3 seasons last year, but he missed a ton of 2 previous seasons. He was only playing that many because he was skirting along a foot injury. He didn't expect to get cut this offseason. I think that was a surprise. So it's not like he was in a contract year and trying to gut through it for a new contract. He thought he was going to be a Charger this year. But the pessimistic side is, well, I know he's only 29, but he's an old 29 in injury years, and he's just on a downward trend. I think that's very possible. There is plenty of risk in this deal. It's why I'm glad it's a 1-year deal. I'll get into some of the numbers in a minute. The optimistic side is when he was healthy in week 1 and kind of back to looking like himself in the playoff game against the Houston Texans, he was his dominant self. He looked fantastic. He had, 4 sacks in those games, 13 pressures in those 2 games, and looked like the elite player that was 2 tiers above those guys and was consistently in the top 5 to 8 in all the pass rush win rate metrics. If that's a possibility, for how long of a stretch can you get that for still being available in the playoffs? That's the kind of guy that could be the difference maker to win a Super Bowl, like the pre-injury Von Miller that we were seeing. He's 3 years younger than when Von Miller signed with the Bills. That's what you're hoping for, but the risk is very, very real, and we don't know if we're going to be able to have that for any sustained period. I do think we see a very significant snap management, game management plan throughout the year. But being able to go through all those different pieces, it was, going to be interesting to see how they go about using a player like this and trying to balance of, do you get the value from playing him, or do you minimize some of the regular season value by keeping him in the garage, but then you're worried about the money you spent, hoping to get him to the playoffs? I'm super curious to see their usage plan, start, snap rate, when they use him, and how they get him ready to hopefully be there in January.
Yeah, it's the Bosa thing to me is all optics, and it's such a weird conversation with how we talk about different players and where they're at and what they've done. To me, it's one interesting one is like the conversation I had to have with people about Von Miller last year in a limited snap count and playing at when playing at an elite level in terms of pass rush specifically and good in the run game, and people hated it and he was washed and they wanted nothing to do with him. And then they signed Joey Bosa and everyone's like, well, but then like if he is at the elite level, and I think Von Miller, I don't think Von Miller into this year and going forward can maintain that maybe necessarily. I don't think it's a good bet. I think Bills moving on from him is totally fine. That's a totally reasonable thing. But then to assume that Bosa would be better than what we saw out of Von Miller, I don't know that that's there anymore. I think that it can be.
It's purely a bet that the 6-year age difference is enough.
Yeah, but even I think that he's playing at the level that we saw Von Miller play last year, and I think in terms of that is my expectation is that he can be that type of pass rusher that can fill what Von Miller was doing for the Bills last year, which is good. Like that, I was happy with that Von Miller role. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I watched every snap. I didn't see I know he was battling through that injury. Even in that first game, it was good. He had a good game. It was against the Raiders. He had one sack there. I don't agree in that wild card game. I don't think he was good in the wild card game from what I watched. You saw a player that seemed like he was battling still with injury, and he came up limping a bunch throughout the year. I was a little surprised with how often he was on the ground. And maybe that's all due to injury. That's something we don't know. But I do think that the market showed that there's some concern for if he is 6 years younger than Von, or if he's trending closer to where Von Miller is now in terms of the injury age of the player. And so I don't think the deal's crazy. I don't think there's a ton of risk associated with the Bills getting him. And I think if they do what they did with Von and give him a limited snap count, I think it'll be a little bit more than Von's, because I think he that size, and I think he's a better run defender right now presently. And I think they're going to want that again to stay in nickel with that size. So I think he'll have a little bit more of a snap count than Von did, but I think the load management will be similar. I think the results should be somewhere similar to what we saw from Von, and I'm cool with that. I'm okay with that, but I don't think he's, if I would love to be wrong on this one, Greg, where if we come into January, February, and he is the reason that they're getting sacks and getting Patrick Mahomes to the ground, let's sign him, let's get this. And I'll come out here and be the first one to say I'm wrong. But if he's just Von Miller, I think that's also good. I think that's an okay thing. So I'm not trying to pump the brakes hard of like, oh, I don't like this deal. It's more, I'm trying to frame my expectations of, I think this is good enough. I think they're just kind of filling what they had, and they're going to do more here in the draft and address this more and into the future. But they were ready to move on from Von and that age, and they're just kind of refilling that well.
So the deal that they did to do that was 1 year, $12 million. They did it with a $9 million signing bonus and a $3 million salary. He also has $3 million more in incentives for playing time and sacks. Those are currently set at like not likely to be earned incentives. So if he has more than 6+ sacks, and plays in more than 14 games and a higher percentage of snaps, he would earn $3 million additional. I would say that it's somewhere, like I said, similar to your reaction on the incentive or the suspension piece. I'm in the middle of that. If we get what we got from Von Miller last year, then we overpaid for Joey Bosa. Like we overpaid for him, then he's going to be below average value of what we paid. I'm not going to assume that at 29 that just is what he is now. That I think that his level of from every season of his career besides last year, he went on the field elite and was he was originally a $27 million player. When he signed his contract, he actually looked like a $30 million a year deal, but he ended up being like 25 to 27 million. He was, the highest paid pass rusher in the NFL at one point, and is still 29. So I'm hopeful that there's maybe somewhere in between those two. Maybe it doesn't ever get back to his peak levels, which of course that's very reasonable that it may not be. But I'm hopeful that there's more than what we saw from him trying to gut through that foot injury last year. And that like he almost never practiced the entire season. And like you said, was coming up limping or not even able to stay on his feet throughout a lot of the reps that are there. And then like I said, with all that you saw, that didn't look all that impressive to the eye test, he was as good as Josh Sweat's career best season, Chase Young's career best season, and Gregory Rousseau's career best season. So I'm hopeful that if healthy and managed properly, and with the set that we have with him, that we see better than the eye test was last year, which would mean better production, closer, somewhere in between, not to the career level that he had before, but better than last year, which would make it that this contract would make sense. Yeah. And that he would hit the incentives that are there to be able to hit and earn $15 million. The way they have it set up now, he's going to have only a $5.3 million cap hit this year. We've kicked $7.2 million to next year. However, if he plays well and we want to extend him, we can keep that spread out as like $1.5 million a season, just under $2 million a season over the next 4 years. So if he plays well, and next year they're like, hey, you were great. We're at Super Bowl parade. And he's saying, oh, I want to come back and play another season in Buffalo. You could keep that spread out. We don't have to take the dead cap hit. And you sign him back for whatever, 2 years, $30 million to give him a chunk guaranteed to be able to be here opposite Greg Rousseau further.
Yeah. I think Von Miller was better than people realized last year. He missed 4 games and still had 6 sacks. Was top 10 in PRP at 9.6. Mm-hmm. So again, I'm not like, I think if Von Miller played those 4 games, he's probably closer to 9 sacks on the season. And then I think the conversation about the season he had was different. If Bosa comes in and gives me 10 sacks, 10 sacks.
I know obviously you talk about the importance of not overestimating. It is finishing. It is like, it's not just the looping around the back where the quarterback gets to step up and over and over and over again, but you technically get credit for a pressure and finishing. Is it someone we've had so much of that over the last couple of years? Do we have someone that the style equates better by collapsing the pocket and causing, whether it's direct his sacks or more hockey assist sacks because you've collapsed the pocket? That's the impact we would need to see. That's what would make this contract pay off. And if he doesn't do that, I think it was a poor value in this. I think it needs to directly impact more sacks for this team.
Yeah, I don't agree. I think sacks are the super, even for the most elite players, it's the rare outcome of a pass rush snap. I need consistent pressure from the defensive ends. I want more sacks as a team. I obviously want pass rush snaps to end in sacks. But if he's for me, if he's having a season similar to what we saw from Von, where he's pressuring at a high rate, trending towards double-digit sacks, to me that would feel successful for me, and I think that's what the Bills need out of a player like him. Because I think Groot's still ascending. I think he's going to be your premier guy, your number one pass rusher in this defense.
All right. Anything else for that? That's a recap of everything that's been there. I know a couple people asked for guys who are still out there. A lot of people have asked me for how much cap space they have for this year more than any other year, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They can create $50 million more in cap space if they wanted to. They are only doing it as they go because they don't need it. It would be the equivalent of you emptying your bank account so you could walk into the store with all the money in your pocket and then go see what you can buy. That's not how any of you shop. You know you have access to the money if you want. If you see something that's a good deal, you go get the money or you get access to the money. That's what Brandon Beane's doing. He could restructure Deion Dawkins and Taron Johnson and Spencer Brown and Dawson Knox and like multiple other things anytime you wanted to create more cap space. They could work out a pay cut or a release with Daquan Jones. They have, triggers available to them. They'll use it if an opportunity presents itself. Like I said, I don't think that Asante Samuel is a realistic fit. There are like play style reasons not and cost reasons not. However, if it comes down to where, I didn't realize Asante Samuel was going to sign with somebody for $6 million and incentives up to $8 million, well, we could spend that. They could create that tomorrow. Boom. Deion Dawkins restructure $9.8 million. Hey, look, there's $10 million. They have multiple of those available. They could restructure or they could extend Connor McGovern, which I really hope they do. I think that creates another $4 million. Boom, done. $4 million, free money right here. There are lots of tools like that. Taron Johnson's another one. Those three together is $18 million in cap space. So those are things that they can do at any moment, anytime they want, and be able to create the cap space they need. They're only going to do it if they need to. So we'll see what opportunities presents itself. We will see more of the Derek Forrest, Kendrick Green, those kind of signings. We will definitely have more of those. I don't think it's impossible that Rasul Douglas could be back. I almost wonder, is it, hey, if we take Amos in the first round, we don't sign him back. But what if we sign kind of a upside project guy at 62 who might start, but Rasul, why don't you come in and kind of be the, other plan in case this guy isn't ready because he hasn't gotten an offer from anywhere else yet. I think you could see that too. Yeah. I'm not sure where that goes.
Like Rasul, he doesn't even have to do training camp, right? Like there's no rush for a vet like that to rush his way back if he is even interested. So
I know there was it's here in the chat. Some people were talking about the Jaguars putting Travon Walker on the block. Travon Walker might be the single most underrated player in the league because I think somehow fans think that he's not Aiden Hutchinson. But because he's not Aiden Hutchinson, some people who no one watches Jacksonville. No one has any idea what Jacksonville does in football. No one watches any of their games. He's had back-to-back double-digit sack seasons. He has more sacks than Gregory Rousseau. He's also been a really good run defender and been a very good defender. And that exact same chunk of players we talked about where it was Chase Young, Josh Sweat, Joey Bosa, Gregory Rousseau. Travon Walker's right there, literally in that group of players. And he's going to cost $5.3 million and then has a fifth-year option next year at $14 million. So it's like a 2-year, $19 million commitment for a team. They would get a very nice draft pick for that. At minimum, like he's a better asset than DK Metcalf. Like DK Metcalf's a shinier name. For an NFL GM, Travon Walker from the Jaguars is a better asset than DK Metcalf because Travon Walker is not going to ask for a $150 million contract this offseason. Give it till next offseason. Yep. So sure, if we get a corner and a defensive tackle on our first 2 picks and we don't like the guy on the board and Jacksonville wants to give us Travon Walker for our 62nd pick, sure, that's great. He's really, really good. That's not going to happen. Like he's going to be a Jaguar and play opposite their Josh Hines Allen. Then it's also a BS account that was saying that he was being chopped.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to get moved. But to your point, the Bills have the flexibility to make moves.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. And a more realistic one, if something came up with, again, we get through the draft and we don't get the defensive tackle we want, or we don't get the corner we want, or like a more like prominent position. We're like, oh man, we really were hoping we got one in those 2 spots. You could absolutely go kick around some of those other teams that are maybe not competing this year and see if you could trade for somebody there and use that. You see that a lot on that morning of day 2 or that morning of day 3 of the draft, where all of a sudden it's not like, hey, we didn't get who we wanted and we have all those extra 5th and 6th round picks. I'd love to flip one of those 5s or 6s for a veteran contract from a team that's not competing and just bring in a guy that go, hey, look, we just added X. I'm going to research some of those. I don't have those names off the top of my head yet. I'm going to research specifically defensive tackle and cornerback from, teams that I think are willing to do that. I'm going to have some of those names in the coming weeks as we go.
Awesome. It's draft season.
Next week we will be having former PFF host Sam Monson. I would go back and forth with them a lot on Twitter, and we were actually talking and joking about Joey Bosa's usage, and I was like, well, hey, this would be fun. Why don't you come on and we'll ask him of some of his thoughts on the Bills offseason and about some of the draft needs, and you and I will officially switch gears into draft season and get into mock drafts and where we are with the draft, and I'll learn who's in the draft. This is going to be exciting for me. This is not a lie, I have not done a single mock draft yet, and I will do my first one live on the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for saving that for us.
It's special. I just wanted to make it special for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I've done a few. I have started to dig in. Free agency sort of slowed down for me and started jumping right into the draft. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun, a lot of picks, a lot of potential for moving around for Brandon Beane. So all that stuff gets me real excited. And I think it's going to be one where they got to target some things they need. I think rookies are going to have to play this year for the Buffalo Bills. So it'll kill that narrative once and for all.
Yeah. And one of my other favorite fun things, people get frustrated and upset with what the roster looks like today. Yeah. It doesn't matter. There's going to be guys added to this team. One, we have 10 draft picks coming up here, and at least 5 or 6 of those are going to be for sure utilized and added to this roster. And we'll make more signings between now and then too. So everybody take a breath. There's no game coming up. We're going to be fine.
Got plenty of time.
Huge thank you to our fantastic friend and sponsor, William Mattar, and his team over at William Mattar Law Offices. You know the slogan, hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 844-444-4444. Fantastic work with, great, and we're so excited they renewed again for this season. We work with them all year long. If you are interested in joining our fantastic team of sponsors and having us talk to these great fans about your restaurant or store or service or car wash or whatever it may be, come drop us a note. Come reach out to us. We have a one more spot open for this coming season. They're looking for a fun organization to join us here in our journey.
Absolutely.
Anything else for the people?
No, that's it, man. We went late. We can't stop talking. It's the worst.
Well, you guys had missed me for 2 weeks. I had a lot of catching up to do. This was like Festivus. I got a lot of problems with you people, and you're gonna need to hear about them.
That's it.
I appreciate you guys. On behalf of fantastic producer Chris Kepner and Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast, brought to you by William Mattar Law Offices, and we are